Welcome to Penumbra. The conversation starts now. Good afternoon and welcome to Penumbra. I'm very excited to have a very special guest with me today, Mr. Dana McLendon of Dana McLendon Law in Franklin, Tennessee. Dana, welcome to Penumbra and thank you very much.
Hey, man, glad to be here.
All right, Dana, just kind of given the broad strokes of where we're going to go today. First of all, I would like to dive into your background. Tell me a little bit about where you grew up, where you went to high school, what you were involved with, and then we'll go from there.
Okay. I grew up on I-40 in Tennessee and North Carolina, mostly North Carolina, Winston-Salem, Hickory, Asheville, and Nashville in Tennessee. And went to three different high schools in three different cities. Finished at a boarding school in Asheville, North Carolina, small boarding school up there with a couple hundred boys and about 20 day student girls. Then went to the University of South Carolina as a freshman. And because my family had moved to Florida, transferred to the University of Florida, finished there, and then went to Vanderbilt Law School in Nashville and stuck around. Got licensed to practice law in 1993, stayed in Nashville, spent about 5 years at a great firm in Nashville, and then relocated my practice to Franklin, where I live.
All right. Tell me a little bit about your time at boarding school. Did you enjoy that?
No, I did not. It was a necessity. The town that I was living in at the time was a furniture mill town, and in that, at least at that time, your family either owned a mill or worked in a mill. And all the kids whose families owned the furniture mills went to Woodbury Forest, Episcopal, Choate, a variety of boarding schools across the East Coast because the local public high school was not a particularly good school. And so you had a lot of people that went to that school dropped out as soon as they were old enough to not be held truant and went to work in the furniture mill where they would work for the rest of their lives. So it was kind of an academic dead end to go to that public high school. If you graduated at the top of your class there, you might or might not be admitted to, a good public school college. So when my family moved there, I was in the middle of my freshman year of high school. And it didn't take me long to realize that if I stayed in this town, all that was going to happen was I was going to get in trouble. So I made the decision I wanted to go to boarding school. I was also a difficult teen. I'm sure that I was not easy to deal with. So I went to a boarding school mostly out of necessity. I didn't enjoy it, but I got a great education and it made college easy.
All right. And while you were at boarding school, did you play any sports or were you involved in any scholastic activities?
I wrestled. I was pretty good at that, mostly because I was angry.
What weight class did you wrestle at?
I'd start at 167 and cut to 155. And then by the end of the season, I think I could go up to like 157.
Okay. And then you went on to the University of South Carolina, the Gamecocks, and then
Yep.
transferred to another SEC school, my alma mater, the
Yep.
University of Florida. When were you at Florida?
I got to Florida in, the fall of 87, graduated in December of 89 because I finished a semester early, spent the spring of 90 in Gainesville, just goofing around until I went to law school in the fall of 90 in Nashville at Vanderbilt.
Okay. And there are a lot of Gator fans that listen to this. So when you were there, Galen Hall was finishing up his tenure as a football coach and Steve Spurrier was just coming in, right?
I was there during the Galen years, but a small claim to fame here. I did sit next to Emmitt Smith. I sat actually my spring semester, my last semester in Gainesville. I was in an assigned seat between Emmitt Smith and Dwayne Shinsis. If you're an old school
Absolutely.
Gator fan, you'll
Sep-
remember Dwayne Shinsis.
Yeah, he was like
That was
7'7". He was like
he,
7'2", 7'1". He was a nasty guy, kind of a Bill Laimbeer type player, had the mullet, that Kentucky
yep,
waterfall, as they call it.
that's right.
He played with Vernon Maxwell on the team, who was one of the most fabulous basketball players to ever play for the University of Florida. I think he had some substance abuse problems that hindered his pro career. But we used to go up, I lived in Dade City, a small country town in Pasco County, and we would go up on Thursday nights to watch those particular players play basketball, and it was great.
Yeah, that semester that I had already graduated and I didn't have anywhere to go until fall when I was started law school. And my dad was like, well, you need to take some business classes because I had been a history major, much to his disappointment. Both my parents had MBAs and he just never could wrap his head around the fact that I didn't want to BS in business administration. So he insisted that my last semester I take some business type classes. So I found this stats for jocks class. And when I went in and sat down, I knew I'd picked the right one because like the entire defensive line and two tutors came in and sat in the front row. And the TA came in and passed out a seating chart and said, attendance is 30% of your grade or whatever. So I just happened to sit down and this huge hulking shadow drew my attention to my right, and I looked up and I kept looking up and I kept looking up, and it's Dwayne Schientz's. Everyone knew who he was because he was like supposed to be a draft pick, lottery draft pick, and a superstar in the NBA. And within a couple of weeks, he had quit school. He'd taken the bait. I think some boosters had told him, "You don't need to be here anymore." They changed coaches in the middle of that season, and I think they brought in Norm Sloan, who was like a disciplinarian, to kind of crack the whip over those guys. And Shin just didn't want any of it. He quit the team, quit Florida, went to Europe for like 6 months, played ball there, came back, got drafted. But to my left sat Emmett Smith. And when I looked, everybody within, 800 miles would have known Emmett Smith on sight. And he shook my hand and he said, "My name's Emmett." I'm like, "Well, duh." Right. He was just as humble and nice a guy as you could ever hope to meet. And he spent that spring preparing for the combine because they had told him, "You're too small, you're too slow, you're whatever." And he would leave from class and go work out that spring. And I never forgot the dichotomy between the way those two fellas handled their pending professional careers. And of course, we know what happened next.
Yeah, I think, Emmett had, some success in the NFL.
Limited. Yeah.
And Dwayne Schientzis is a, kind of a blip on the history of NBA basketball.
Yeah. He's kind of a tragedy. He passed away a few years ago. And, you just have to wonder what could have been.
Yeah, absolutely. He had a ton of talent, as did Vernon Maxwell. I think, he sidelined his career, due to his off the field, off the court issues, which was very
Well,
unfortunate.
yeah. And it was the 80s in Gainesville. And all I can tell you about it is I heard I had a good time.
All right. So you left Gainesville, you went to Vanderbilt, got your law degree, and then,
Mhm.
what'd you do, once you graduated from law school?
Got hired at a great law firm in downtown Nashville at a time when Nashville was really starting to change. At the time I got the job in downtown Nashville, I was living in Franklin, Tennessee, and about, 30 minutes from work. And Nashville was right on the cusp of becoming the city it has now become. But at the time in downtown Nashville at night, you left. There was nothing to do, a couple of tourist traps, but you wouldn't go to downtown and except to show a tourist, Tootsie's or something. Loved the firm that I worked for, but figured out I wasn't a firm kind of guy. They were very good to me and I learned a lot there and had some great mentors. And it was me. I just wasn't a good employee. Got an opportunity to come down to Franklin to work for a guy who had been a U.S. attorney for the Middle District of Tennessee, Ernie Williams. His partner had just been elected judge and he needed someone to come in and, do some of the work there. So got in with Ernie quickly, started meeting everybody, practicing down here all the time. Been here now, I don't know what that is, 30 something years. And eventually went out on my own. I think that was destiny. As I said earlier, I'm not a good employee and that's nobody's fault but mine. But I think I was more or less destined to be out on my own. So I've been out on my own, hanging my own shingle, as they say, for several decades now.
And when you went out on your own, what area of law did you decided to, practice in?
So when I came up, the answer to do you want to go to court was yes. These days, I see these young lawyers and they've gotten themselves into a niche where they're either like domestic relations lawyers or they're criminal defense lawyers or they're civil lawyers. And that's fine. But when I was young, decades ago, if somebody said, "I've got this file, do you want to go to court?" You didn't ask, "Well, is it in my lane?" You went to court. So when I went out on my own, and I jokingly refer to myself as a street lawyer. The view from my office isn't great, but my clients are almost always individuals. And I do criminal defense, I do domestic relations, and I do, if it interests me, I'll do interesting civil litigation.
Okay, and a couple of things with that. So you do criminal defense, domestic relations, family law type stuff, and then you said you do civil litigation if it interests you. What do you mean by that?
Well, I don't, if a lot of the civil litigation that I do might be connected to a divorce or a criminal case. Sometimes people get charged with a crime and sued out of the same series of events. Occasionally, you'll have a divorce that has some wrinkles in, the party in a divorce might be also a party to a business divorce at the same time. So, it's a case by case basis. The majority of what I do is criminal defense and domestic relations. But
All
if
right.
there's an interesting civil case that's not outside of my capacity, I'll consider it and sometimes do it. I don't do any plaintiff's work. I don't do car wrecks or malpractice cases or anything.
Okay. And I know that you're a trial lawyer, and I always ask this question of attorneys that describe themselves as a trial lawyer. What's the difference in your mind between a trial lawyer and a litigator, if there is one?
I mean, I could give you a cynical answer to that. I think that there are a lot of lawyers who say that they are trial lawyers, and what they really are lawyers who spend, 60 hours a week with paper and occasionally go to court, maybe on a motion docket. They handle conflicts that have a caption, that have a case file number at the courthouse, but they seldom go. Trial lawyers are in the courthouse a lot. I spend more time, well, I don't about say about more, but well, I mean, I'll give you an example. This week I have an order protection hearing, two criminal cases, a custody trial, and a preliminary hearing in an A felony. And when I finish that, that's Monday through Thursday. And then Friday, I'll sit down and write a brief in the Court of Appeals that's pending in the Court of Appeals. So I guess my difference between a litigator and a trial lawyer is trial lawyers spend considerable amount of time at the courthouse compared to litigators who spend a lot more time in a conference room or working with paralegals or paper.
Yeah, speaking of paper, you've practiced law essentially since the early 90s. Would that be fair?
Yeah,
And
93, I got licensed. I was working in law offices starting in 1990.
and obviously the implementation of email as a component of what lawyers do in the discovery process and all that, having potentially had the benefit of getting into the practice of law when emails weren't such a thing, and then continuing on to what emails have evolved today with the practice of law. Just tell me, what are your thoughts on that? And also in that same question, what has really changed over the couple of decades that you've been practicing law, for the good or the bad of the career?
Okay, so I guess I've become that guy. Let me tell you how old I am. I went to law school and we learned to shepherdize and research with hardback books that were in stacks. And we didn't learn that because we were being punished. We learned it that way because that's what there was. At the time, Westlaw was emerging. We were able to use it, but it wasn't at all what it is now. I didn't get my first email address until I was at a law firm, and that email connected to a dial up modem, and you couldn't really send anything. I mean, it was a green screen with WordPerfect 5.1. So at the time, if you got a fax, it was on thermal paper and you better not put it in the window because if you left your thermal fax paper fax in the window, when you came back, it was black and curly. It looked like it had been burnt to a crisp. FedEx was kind of the bane of our existence because a client could FedEx you 300 pages and get it to you the day after or the next day and then call you and say, what do you think? And so, the answer was often, well, do you want an answer that might be right or do you just want an answer? Because your ability to deliver a stack of documents to me does not mean I can process them and put them into a coherent analysis for you at the same speed that FedEx can put it on my desk. Well, all that's just gotten worse, with email and now texting. And, FedEx I don't remember the last time anybody FedEx me anything. Everything comes across as a PDF. Most of the courthouses that I work in, not all, but most of them are electronic filing. I've always been on the cutting edge of technology as a lawyer, partly because that's one of my competitive advantages as a sole practitioner who handles a lot of volume. I do so as a matter of convenience to me, but also as a matter of force multiplication. But when somebody can email you a large document and then text you and say, did you get my document? Every client wants immediate, undivided attention, and they can all saturate you simultaneously. I know, for example, I know what's going to happen. On Monday morning, 25 people will reach out to me and say, basically, what have you done for me lately? So I would say that when I started this career, thermal fax paper, internet wasn't a thing, email was barely a thing. And now I'm sitting here with Claude Cowork open, managing dockets and building calendar deadlines. I get a scheduling order, I scan it in, and I have Claude build a calendar file to populate my calendar to keep me on track. So I don't know that I would describe it as better or worse, but it goes faster than it used to, I think.
Yeah, and also another comment I have about that from the advent of email and basically how it somewhat has exploded the discovery file that comes with a case, right? There's many, many more documents. Like when you first started trying cases, when you came out of law school, like the file for the case was pretty thin, and there's a couple of letters, maybe a contract or something like that, and you could go try a case relatively easy because there's not a lot of things to review to get ready for that trial. Talk to the witness, look at the file, go try the case. But now with all the emails and all the ESI discovery and those types of things where you're just getting inundated with PDFs and drop file links and all that kind of stuff, tons and tons of documents, that kind of hinders the expediency for trying the case.
Yeah, it's also true that when I started practicing law, if you wanted to catch somebody cheating on their spouse, you hired a PI and sent them out to follow them around. Now you just subpoena their Facebook data, or you just get Instagram and find them on Instagram. And I don't remember the last time I used a PI in a courtroom to prove anything, because 5 subpoenas later, I can prove everything.
Yeah, I mean, people are pretty open about their social media profiles these days. And I don't do social media, but you hear stories and it's just amazing what people will put out there, especially people that are going through a divorce or something like that, where you're just like, what are you doing?
I will say this: the culture around the things that wind up at the courthouse. So the culture at large, if you will, has definitely gotten worse. In the 30 something years I've been practicing, as you said, what people are willing to tell anyone and everyone, including 8 billion strangers, is astonishing to me. And never mind what they're willing to do to someone that they share children with or whatever through it. So the technology part, I know lawyers that still carry paper calendars and have to call their secretary and ask if they can come back to court in 2 weeks. I know lawyers who barely send email, but all of us have been impacted. I think if you stay on top of technology, you can make it what you want. The culture around the courthouse, because the conflicts that wind up at the courthouse are the ones you can't fix before you get there, right? So the cases that we try are the worst, where you have people locked into this conflict and they have frequently abandoned any shame and become the worst version of themselves.
Yeah, and being a criminal defense attorney and a family practitioner, obviously you're generally seeing your client at their lowest spot, right? They're not in a good spot when they come into your office.
That is universally true. And I remind myself of that probably about 4 or 5 times a day. That the version of the person I'm dealing with is probably not the version that their family gets at Thanksgiving, not the version that their coworkers get, not the version that their spouse or whatever. Sometimes the spouse gets it worse in a divorce, but by and large, I do have to remind myself that I am getting the worst version of this person. And there's seldom anything that causes my client more anxiety and fear than whatever it is I'm dealing with for them. I mean, the things that bump whatever I'm doing for them off of the top of that list are like aging, dying parent, or personal health crisis, or financial ruin. And so, other than those type of things, whatever I'm doing is the thing that causes them the greatest anxiety. So when someone reaches out to me by text, and it's already happened this morning, I remind myself, hey, this person is going through something. To me, it's just Tuesday. To them, it's the biggest moment in their life, or it's the one that has caused them the most fear or the most anxiety for months. I got people going to court with me this week that are going to probably have jail sentences, potentially lose custody, maybe get bound over for a jury trial on a case that, if convicted, could send them to prison for functionally the rest of their life. And that's to say nothing of the many tens of thousands of dollars that are at stake in other things I'll be managing this week. People ask me what I do for a living, and depending upon what kind of mood I'm in, I might look at them and say, I get up every day and go into someone else's worst day.
That's right. And obviously they're relying on you to shepherd them through the system, because when they turn the case over to you, when you're representing them, they no longer have any real control in the outcome, right? Other than working with you, and you're working to facilitate the best outcome you possibly can for them. But there's someone on the other side who's fighting just as hard to facilitate a different outcome for their client or for the state or whoever that other side might be.
Yeah. And, I kind of use that too, because I'll tell someone, hey, you have now outsourced the anxiety. That doesn't make it all go away, but it means you don't have to worry about a lot of this stuff that you were worrying about yesterday, right? Like, hey, here's the plan. We're going to the courthouse. I think the range of outcomes is between this and this. And when you can tell someone with some confidence, hey, your worst day at the courthouse is survivable, they tend to start breathing again.
And obviously, what you just described with your upcoming week and all the various things that you have to go do for your clients, a lot of those sound like very high stakes things. So, what in particular about your practice keeps you up at night?
I can tell you about the dream I had last night.
Let's go.
Okay. I can't quite put my finger on why this dream happens to me, but it does. I have a dream that happens to me periodically that I am back at boarding school or college. And I am there frequently as the adult I am now, but I am there and I have dropped in on the morning of or the night before an exam that I haven't studied for or even been to the class. And so I don't know what that means. Maybe some of your listeners can tell me how to interpret this dream. What keeps me up? Nothing keeps me up. I lay down in the bed, I fall asleep. The things that cause me anxiety or maybe that dream are just making sure that I don't miss anything. Like I'm looking at my calendar, I see deadlines, deadlines for filing, court appearances, discovery deadlines, all that kind of stuff. Managing those things is double-edged because they're all there. And so they cause anxiety. How am I going to get all this done, right? I'm going to be in 4 different courthouses in 4 days this week with high stakes things. That's anxiety provoking. On the other hand, managing those things effectively with a good system mitigates that for me. So I rely on technology to help me with my calendars and workflow and all that. So I don't get too worried about outcomes at the courthouse. I mean, until you're sitting next to someone who's facing felony time, and even then, I don't know, I don't get too worried about outcomes because I don't control outcomes. I control processes and inputs and what I can do. The outcomes depend upon judges and juries and sometimes even the client. I can't fix every mess that a client has made.
Yeah, that's right. And this funny thing that you mentioned about that particular dream of yours, where it goes back to when you were in school and you find out in your dream that there was a class that you were supposed to be attending, or maybe there's an exam that was coming up and you had no idea about it and you're walking into that exam blind. I've had that exact same dream multiple times going back to college, where basically the dream is that I've signed up for 5 classes, but at the end of the semester, it turns out I accidentally signed up for 6. And then all of a
Or I
sudden
signed
there's
up for 5 and I knowingly and intentionally only went to 3.
correct.
Yeah,
Uh,
last night's exam was a chemistry was some kind of math chemistry. Like, I don't know anything about that. I would never take that class in the first place, but somehow I'm supposed to go take this mathematics in chemistry exam. I don't know.
And the funny thing about it is in the moment when you're having that dream, it seems so real and so anxiety inducing. I don't know how that works. I don't know how the brain works and how you're so creative in your own mind that you can create basically this little movie for you to watch while you're sleeping about something that's essentially a horror movie. Then you wake up and you're
Yeah.
like, thank God I don't have to go to that class. Now I just have to go to a felony trial today.
That's right. Well, and maybe as a programmed response, every Sunday I sit down and plot my week with pen and paper. Well, not pen and paper. It's a digital tablet, but I sit down and I write. Even though I have my calendar digital on Sundays, I sit down and I write my week and just make myself kind of think about, okay, have I printed the exhibits for that? It just kind of slows down everything. Well, many times I do that on Sunday night. For whatever reason, I woke up from this dream and I went and did it this morning. So I don't know.
Yeah, just don't want to miss anything. Is there a particular misconception about the criminal defense world that you could clarify? What is commonly misunderstood about what you do in the system?
Yeah, people all the time ask me, my God, how could you represent someone who's guilty? Or do you know if they're guilty? Well, I always ask, did you do it? Because sometimes it's obvious, right? The video camera, they did it. But when there's any doubt, or even if there's not any doubt, I just ask because I don't want to be the only person in the room that doesn't know the answer. I mean, the DA knows the answer. The victim, if there is one, knows the answer. The detective knows the answer. The person who brought the videotape or the lab results or whatever, they know the answer. I don't want to be the only idiot sitting there that's like, oh my God, that's shocking. So I think the misconception is that representing guilty people or people who may have done something, although maybe not everything they got charged with, is somehow a moral conundrum for me. And it's not. I'm not making the worst person I've ever met this week the godfather of my children or having them come live with me. I am representing them. And depending upon who the audience is, when someone is genuinely baffled about how can you represent someone who did it, something horrible, I might give them this answer. Well, if your brother, father, son, or husband was accused of this crime, who would you want sitting next to them at the courthouse? And they go, well, I'd want the best lawyer I could get. I'm like, there you go. That's answer number one. That's the personal answer. That's the one that rings true to you. However, there's a bigger answer, which is if you like living in civilization, and you do, if you like air conditioning and Publix and anesthesia and antibiotics and the absence of violence as a daily factor in your life, then you like civilization. And if you like civilization, then you must have a functional criminal justice system. Because if you don't have a functional criminal justice system, you don't have a civilization. And if you want a functional criminal justice system, then you absolutely have to have people like me, because I am the only person holding the power of the state to account for what they're saying and doing. They're trying to put someone in prison or bring criminal sanctions against someone. And the only person who is there making sure that, to the extent I can, only the guilty suffer those sanctions, the only person in that room that's doing that is me. The DAs, the cops, the jury, and to some extent, even the judge, they have different jobs. And I'm not saying judges and DAs don't have ethical responsibilities to the system. Of course they do. But one of my first mentors told me that the highest calling of any lawyer is to stand next to the accused and say, ready for trial. So it doesn't cause me any moral conundrums at all.
That's a great answer. After practicing in the criminal defense arena for so long, are there any patterns of human behavior that stand out to you?
Yeah, and this is maybe a little bit counterintuitive. Setting aside the genuinely deeply mentally ill, and I mean the schizophrenic, not the cluster B borderlines and narcissists and all that. I'm talking about the genuinely, like, they're not operating in reality types. Other than that depth of mental illness, most everyone makes what they believe to be rational choices under the circumstances as they see them. Now, they might have a distorted view of reality. Their reality might be put through a lens of their experience that distorts the reality for them. And they may make terrible choices in that environment. But most people think that they're doing something rational. Even thieves, they often justify it, through, oh, I should have, if I'm stealing from my employer, they should have paid me more. I deserve it. I'm not saying that's rational. I'm saying they think it is. So you don't often come across the criminals that are like Clockwork Orange, just going out and causing chaos and violence for no reason.
Ultra violence.
Yeah, most violence is situational. Criminal conduct is situational. If you took the same person, I represented a guy not long ago. I'll give you an example. I represented a guy not long ago who came up in poverty, came up in violence, came up in street crime, came up in exploitative crime. Okay. Where you took what you wanted from someone who couldn't keep you from doing it. You made people do things who couldn't stop you from making them do it, right? That's the world he came up in. That's the school and the university that he got a master's degree in. That same guy, if he had grown up in a different environment with a stable family unit and even modest resources available to him, would currently be an entrepreneur making $250,000 a year and grousing about the tax bill. The difference between what he is and became and what he could have been was where he was born and to whom. I think a lot of people want to believe that there are these, like, I would never do that, or no one I know would do that, or that doesn't happen here. Kind of like, people like to feel comfortable and safe and insulated from that kind of thing. And the people who say that are frequently comfortable and safe. And so they have a much easier time condemning the people who are other.
Yeah, I think identifying those types of people, which you just described as like a monster or some kind of madman or something like that, allows the other side of society to kind of say, well, yeah, he's a dangerous person and he's going to be a dangerous person no matter what. But lock him up and throw away the keys, sort of thing, without going into the analysis, which you just talked about. Had he gone to that boarding school in that town that you grew up in, and then maybe went to the University of Florida, and maybe he sat next to Emmett Smith and
Right.
went to Vanderbilt Law School after that, maybe he'd be representing you if the roles were reversed.
100%. I mean, nature and nurture compete, right? But if you're born into poverty and violence, getting out is hard. If you're
Uh,
born into comfort and convenience, staying in it is easy.
Absolutely. Has there been a particular case that has fundamentally changed how you view human beings in your career?
Ooh, yeah. The hair on my neck has stood up 3 times where I realized I was in a room with someone that was permanently dangerous and unsalvageable. And 2 of those times were with pedophiles.
Yeah, you don't need to say anymore. I'm with you there, and they say I think there's a special place in hell for those types of people.
I would never defend the behavior. I have come to believe that for the most part, people like that were either the victims first before they became the perpetrators, or they were born with a preference that they cannot change. It's the behavior that's punishable, and it has to be. So I don't defend the consequences of the behavior. But no one wakes up one day and says, you know what I think I'd like to be. But yeah, when you see something like that up close, you realize that there are people who walk among us that are problems.
Yeah. What particular advice would you give yourself when you were starting out with all the experience you have now? If you were able to go back in time and tell yourself one thing, one piece of advice, what would that be?
I would tell young lawyer Dana that there is nothing more insufferable than a baby lawyer. Keep your mouth shut and find good mentors. You don't know what you think you know.
What's the most emotionally difficult type of case for you to handle?
Sitting next to an innocent man.
Why is that?
Because someone who did it, who knows they did it, everyone knows they did it. We're just there to try to work out the best possible consequence. We're just trying to mitigate the outcomes, right? You sit next to a man who didn't actually do it, who might go to prison, notwithstanding their actual innocence. That's anxiety. That's where you take on a disproportionate amount of responsibility for the outcome. I guess the only analogy I could give you is that, I think a lot of what I do is kind of like being an emergency room surgeon, right? I don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. I mean, I know where I'm supposed to be at 9 o'clock, but by the end of the day, I could have met someone and be on a 2 year odyssey with them to keep them from going to prison or keep them whatever, right? Well, an emergency room physician shows up. They don't know what's going to happen. They just know an ambulance is going to back up and dump somebody out bleeding and dying or whatever. I would say that sitting next to an innocent man who is charged with a serious crime and against whom there is evidence, that's probably a lot like a surgeon who shows up for work one day and they bring them a child and that child's life or death. They were innocent in getting into the position where they needed this emergency surgery or emergency physician. And now it all falls on the surgeon and the parents are outside.
Wow.
Um,
How many times have you experienced that in your career?
my very first jury trial almost caused me to stop practicing law permanently and go figure out what else I could do with my life. I second chaired an 8 count felony indictment for aggravated child abuse, and the client was actually innocent. And everyone in the room knew it. And no one in the room, besides me in the first chair, tried to stop it. And that young man, who was my age at the time, I was about 26, and talk about, there but for the grace of God go I. Jimmy was his name. I'll never forget Jimmy. Jimmy was my age, but he had grown up poor, grown up without any advantage. Long story, found himself in a bad situation, got charged with 8 counts of aggravated child abuse. He didn't do it. Everyone in the room knew who did do it. The detective solved the crime the night it happened, nonetheless presented the case to the DA. The DA nonetheless decided to run it to the grand jury. The grand jury indicted. The DA took the case to trial. The judge could have and should have dismissed the charges at the conclusion of the state's proof. The judge did not. In my opinion, the judge counted on the jury to see it for what it was and acquit him. However, the jury acquitted him of half and convicted him of half. And that young man spent 2 years at a maximum security prison before the Court of Criminal Appeals said, "This is ridiculous." The young lawyer who told the court that the case should have been dismissed at the conclusion of the state's proof was right. And they remanded it with instructions to dismiss the charges, but not before he spent a couple years in prison. I almost quit practicing. By then I'd been invested in the system, right? I'd gone to college and then I took the LSAT and I went to the law school and I got out. I took the bar and I passed and I went to work and I found an opportunity to do some, serious criminal defense work. And then the whole thing blew up in my face and produced an absurd, ridiculous, and unjust outcome. And I've represented actually innocent people since then, but the scales were plucked from my eyes almost on day one. So I think that's a blessing and a curse for me because I know it can happen. I'm not disillusioned by, this naive belief in a system that never fails. So I know it can and does fail. And that makes me that much more committed to doing the best I can for people that, need the help.
Wow, that's a pretty amazing story, and, I hope Jimmy's doing okay these days. Do you keep in touch with him at all, or you ever heard from him
I
after
don't.
this?
I looked him up and he'd gone on to, last time I looked him up on the system, he'd picked up, some penny ante charges and driving unrevoked and whatnot. And last I saw, when they tried to find him for his last failure to appear or whatever, they couldn't. So I have no idea where he is or what happened next. And I'm currently eyeballs deep in a case like that, but that's a whole long other story.
All
Go
right.
see my podcast for that.
All right. In addition to being a criminal defense and family law attorney up in Franklin, you also dabbled in politics. So tell me a little bit about, one, why you decided to jump into a political career and what you thought about that, what you did, and ultimately what was the outcome when you got done with that part of your life.
That was quite accidental. I moved to Franklin, Tennessee when I was, I don't know, 28, 29 years old, young lawyer. practicing in Nashville, and moved into a subdivision that was under construction, and a zoning issue that affected the neighborhood came up. And I went to a HOA neighborhood, a concerned neighbors meeting, and became the spokesperson for the neighborhood in opposition to something that the developer wanted to do in our neighborhood. Wound up down at City Hall speaking to the planning commission and the board of mayor and aldermen to present, the reasons why they should disallow this thing to happen to our neighborhood. And while doing that, realized that this neighborhood that I lived in was the largest subdivision in the county and had absolutely no representation at the planning commission or board of mayor and aldermen, and decided to run for alderman, city council. I was elected in 1997, and I was reelected 5 times, so 6 4-year terms after that. So if by dabbling in politics you mean 24 years, then yes, I dabbled and spent 24 years as an alderman of the city of Franklin. And much like I was talking about earlier in the conversation about the deterioration of our culture, when I ran for office in 1997, I was 29 years old. And if you wanted to insult me, you had to look me up in a phone book and call me, or you had to come to City Hall and get to the microphone and tell us who you were and offer your insult to me in person. On my 6th election, if you had a telephone, a mobile phone, you could create a fictitious anonymous Twitter account and slander me and have 100 people like it by the time I even read it. And then what do? Right? Like somebody who I cannot even identify has thrown out on the internet in next door, or Facebook or Twitter or whatever, their allegation in the air that I am corrupt and taking kickbacks from developers to approve projects. Who do I even say you're wrong to, right? The lie has traveled halfway around the world before the truth got its boots on, to steal the line from someone else. So I decided I'd had enough of that and walked away from it.
Well, I'm down here in Tampa, Florida, and we don't have aldermen. So, what does an alderman do in Franklin, Tennessee?
In the city of Franklin, it's city council, and the city council of Franklin runs everything except schools. So police, fire, trash, streets, water, sewer, all the local government services except school.
Okay. And in your time in city government, do you believe that the system was working how it should work, or where are the failings?
I think it mostly does. It's the pace at which it makes decisions that was frustrating to me. As a sole practitioner, running a law office, I can change things instantly. If I want to flip my world from MacBooks to PCs and back, I can do that Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday back and forth and wind up where I began, right? The pace at which government makes decisions was excruciating. I think for the most part, the city of Franklin's government gets the right answers. It's just that it was frustrating to me because I could sit in a committee meeting, for example, and mind map my way to the outcome that was desirable, quickly. But then I'd have to go back to 8 more meetings over the next 6 months to get there. And, to some extent, that's not a bug, that's a feature. You don't want to make bad decisions quickly. And if you take your time and get input and get the stakeholders invested and have the conversations, you typically get better outcomes. But the city of Franklin is a really well-run government. We're lucky. There's a lot of talent, and it is ostensibly nonpartisan. So I didn't have to deal with, Republican and Democrat issues. I could just look at people and say, you do want good roads, right? You do want your trash picked up regularly, correct? Good. Vote for me. I didn't have to deal with the things that are so often third rails of elected office.
Yeah. And other than the pace at which the government operated, was there anything that particularly surprised you about your work in city government?
I'm a little cynical about this. It didn't surprise me after it happened 100 times, but what would frequently happen is, we live in a very comfortable, affluent community where people move and they just want to be able to drive their kid to soccer practice without being in a terrible traffic jam, and they want a good school down the road. And every once in a while, we'd have some kind of an issue come up where we were either going to spend a lot of money or make a decision about a development that wanted to be built or whatever it might be. And we would spend, months, sometimes more than a year, working through choices, bringing in consultants and experts and evaluating costs and benefits and everything else. And we'd get down to the very end, and suddenly 50 people would show up with purple shirts that said no. And they were instant subject matter experts. And they frequently would come in and say, you can't do this to us. You have to give us time to participate. You have to, and the thing you're talking about doing is stupid because we Googled it yesterday. And so you'd wind up sitting there going, we have literally been doing this decision for 12 or 18 months. It's a $30 million decision. We have been sitting here doing this every Tuesday night for a year and on cable. Like, you didn't even have to leave your home to watch. You could just get on the internet and watch. And you show up at the last vote with this instant subject matter expertise and demand that we stop everything and then don't do it at all. That was frustrating. Part of the reason I had to get out, because I got to the point where I would tell people that, right? Like, the people who were thinking about their next election would be very nice to those people. Towards the end, was sort of like, I would look at them and say what I just said. And you can imagine how that went over when, someone who'd been sitting there for 20 years looked at him and said, "Where have you been? What go
Yeah,
away."
maybe the same trait that makes you a bad employee potentially made you a bad politician at the end of the
I have
day.
this terrible thing about telling people the truth. I will never sacrifice clarity on the altar of tact, right? Like, I don't get paid to put lipstick on a pig. I get paid to tell people this is bad and all the outcomes are bad, but some are worse. Let's pick the ones that are less worse.
Yeah, and before we move into the next topic, what's your proudest moment while you were serving for city government?
Oh, that's easy. City of Franklin is in the heart of Tennessee and was the scene of a very bloody battle in the Civil War. And so there's a lot of Civil War history around here. And we have in the middle of our square a large monument to Confederate soldiers. And it had in recent years become controversial that there's this 40-foot monument in the middle of our town to Confederate soldiers with some of what we call the lost cause language on it. And we've been through this reckoning over the last, several years in this country about, what do we do with these things? Like, some places have decided to take them down and mothball them or melt them. Other places are standing firm on this is history and culture and whatnot. And I got the opportunity as an alderman to participate in the placement of a monument that added to the story rather than took some of it down. And the monument that we added was a monument, a life-size monument of a United States troop soldier. We put it on the square and we put it in front of the courthouse that was standing during the Civil War, where runaway and freed slaves entered that building as runaways or wanted men or slaves and left that building with enlistment papers to go fight for their own freedom. Because during the Civil War, for most of the Civil War, the Union Army controlled and occupied Franklin, including the courthouse as their headquarters. And so some members of the community came up with the idea that rather than argue about taking things down, we should add to the story and tell the fuller story. And it was not without controversy, but I was able to help make sure that that happened. So if you come to Franklin, Tennessee today, you can go on the square and you can find the marker that was recently put up. It's a life-size bronze statue of a former slave turned Union Army soldier fighting for his own freedom.
Wow, that's great. And for our next topic, for the people that are listening, they may not know other than what your background is, but I didn't know who you were. I've seen your face before, but I never actually met or spoken to you until the other day. I was talking with a mutual friend of ours, a guy named Ben Thomas, great guy, former Navy SEAL. I guess you're always a Navy SEAL. I don't know exactly how that works, but I think once a Navy SEAL, always a Navy SEAL. But our sons play water polo together. And I always chat with him because there's a lot of downtime at these water polo tournaments. And I was telling him about this, and he just kind of casually mentioned, like, oh, you should have my friend Dana come on. You should interview him. And I was like, okay, sure. What's he do? And he's like, he's a lawyer up in Tennessee. And he also did some video about, 10 years ago called The Hot Crazy Matrix. And as soon as he said it, my eyes got as big as saucers because I've seen the video multiple times. And as a student of comedy and a fan of comedy, first and foremost, I think it's one of the finest pieces of comedy that's ever been put on the internet. And I guess today that's not saying much because what passes for comedy today is a very low bar. But you, sir, created what I believe to be a high watermark in the world of internet comedy, especially in the early days when that wasn't really a thing. It was in the early days of YouTube. And I was checking the other day, and I believe the particular original video has about 10 million views.
Good Lord.
But I think collectively it has more than that. I think it has to be closer to in the hundreds of millions by now, if not more.
It's without doubt, it's hundreds of millions. I have transcended fame and become immortal. Quite by accident, I assure you.
No, 100%. And the thing about the video is, well, just before we get into that, just take me back to the beginning of that video because it was posted on a website or YouTube channel. Was it Tactical Response? Is that the name of
Yeah.
the channel?
My good friend, the late James Yeager.
Yeah, Ben told me that James lost his life to ALS, unfortunately.
Yep. Yep.
And just for clarity, looking back and watching the video, I always thought that you were a member of law enforcement or the FBI because what you're wearing in the video, you're wearing like a white shirt with a black tie. I can't remember. You're drawing on a whiteboard, and it felt very you
And I'm
know
wearing a gun.
yeah, and then you're on a tactical response thing. I was like, "Oh, this
Mm.
guy is the detective or something in the unit."
The number of people that assumed that I was a detective goofing around during a training class or something. I get it because that's, I mean,
That's the vibe it gave
yeah,
off. That's exactly what I
that's
thought.
right.
I was telling somebody about this the other day, and they're like, "Isn't that guy law enforcement?" I was like, "No, he's actually an attorney in Tennessee."
Yeah.
So anyways, tell me about basically, let's walk back the origin story of this particular video. One, when did you first come up with the idea, and how did you get it on Tactical Response's YouTube channel?
Okay. So the origin of the bit, I'll call it a bit, is that comes from my practice because I had a guy come in to hire me for like the third time. Always some kind of little misdemeanor scrape that he was involved in. And I looked at him and I said, "Hey, man, do you know why you keep having to come in here and pay me your hard earned money?" And he goes, "Man, I'm unlucky." I said, "No, that is not it." I said, "What do each of your arrests have in common?" He was like, "Me?" I go, "Yes." And some crazy chick. And I'm like, ding, ding, ding. There you go. And he was like, "Well, I don't know." And I just started like trying to visualize this for him. And I don't know what the original rough cut version of this bit was, but it made sense to him when I told him, "Hey, man, you could stop hiring me if you quit hanging around with crazy women." And it just sort of evolved from there. And I would draw the bit for somebody. And, I might be sitting in court next to a lawyer and I'd be like, "Hey, man, I'll show you something funny." Or we'd be in court and we'd see an episode of, crazy chick shenanigans unfold in front of us. And I draw this, and people are like, "Oh, that's funny. Oh, that's funny." And over time, it kind of developed. A few more pieces came along. And I mean, there's a part in the video where I was showing this to a guy one time. That's true. That happened. So like it evolved as I showed it to people. And I didn't realize it because I'm not a stand-up comedian by trade, but I imagine that this is how the best bits you've ever seen sort of come to be. They get roughed out and then they get worked on and then they get shown and then they get retooled and eventually you have something that's polished. I never thought it was polished, but what happened was that I filmed it. I was in Camden, Tennessee, where Tactical Response was on a completely unrelated thing. It actually was a crazy woman case, a meth addict that I had to go down there and help. And I just stopped by randomly to see James, my friend. We were talking and he said, "Well, what brought you down here?" And I don't even know how it came up. But somehow or another, I mentioned this hot, crazy matrix. And he was like, "What are you talking about?" And I go, "Oh, I never showed you." He goes, "No." So I drew it for him. And he said, "Oh, that's funny, man. You should do a video." And I go, "Okay, let's do it." Well, James at the time had a YouTube channel for Tactical Response. And so he had like 250,000 subscribers on his YouTube channel. And he had a camera on a tripod in front of a whiteboard all the time because he would film, himself doing whatever his thing was that day. Could be a gun review, whatever it was. And the channel was probably mostly firearms enthusiasts, people that do self-defense stuff, cops, soldiers, preppers, that kind of genre of people were probably the niche there. And we literally just walked into the training room and turned on the camera and filmed it. And what has now become this hyper viral thing 15, 14 years on was one take. Everything you see was me and James spontaneously riffing our way through the bit that I had created. And during the bit, James yells out, "And hairdressers." And I was like, "And hairdressers." So I add that. And he put it up on the internet a couple of weeks later and it went insane. And so, quite by accident.
Yeah, and what is it like for you to have a viral video of that caliber in your past that kinda somewhat doesn't define who you are, but it's definitely part of who you are these days? Tell me about that experience.
Man, it was wild because I never pondered that it would do that. Like I thought on any given video that James posted, 250,000 subscribers, 10,000 views, move on to the next one. I thought when we post this, 10,000 people of whom I know a good bit personally, who are training partners and all that come through Camden and all that. And James was my client and my friend at the time. So it never occurred to me that this thing would have a life of its own outside of this little world of tactical response. When it blew up, I was getting phone calls from the New York Times. I was getting phone calls from DJs in Australia, the morning shock jock sports crew in Australia. I was like, people were finding me on the internet, on Facebook. There was some backlash from people. I get it. And within a few months, I was in California talking to studio executives about them buying the rights to this bit to make it into a movie. And that led to eventually doing stand up at the local comedy club. That led to eventually doing stand up at the Improv on Hollywood Boulevard in Los Angeles. It led to me being at Grammy parties at the homes of billionaires and to meeting people and getting phone calls. And we're 14 years on. And every week something happened where I'm the hot, crazy Matrix guy. And it's been, I jokingly say, I've become immortal because when I Googled myself at the time when it went viral, I found 300 million views and stopped looking. So, I tell people, oh, I accidentally made this video called The Hot Crazy Matrix. And they're like, I don't know it. I go, yeah, you do. And I show them a screenshot and they're like, oh my God. And they're like, what do you mean you did that? I'm like, that's me. And somehow it's weird because people seem to think that people that make viral videos live in a village together and aren't, just like normal everyday people. They think there's like this little cadre of viral video makers and we're all together and we don't ever actually go out in the world and do anything else.
Yeah,
Um,
it's got a section of people that are drawing on whiteboards like yourself, then it's got a section of
that's
people
right.
that are photographing cats doing things. They keep them all in the same place. But when you guys initially, or when James elected to upload that to his YouTube channel at the time, and you were saying like an average gun instruction video or whatever he was posting was getting 10,000 views or something like that, which is a lot. I mean, these days, I think
Right.
that's even technically maybe considered viral in some aspects. But when the numbers started to tick up, did James pick up the phone and call you and be like, "Oh my god, dude, you gotta check this out." Like, what was that like?
Well, so the funny story about this is that for whatever reason, and not for any intentional reason, I had never showed my wife the bit. My wife and I have been married 34 years. I developed this little bit. It just never came up between us. I don't know why. I didn't conceal it from her. So she'd never seen the bit. Well, the video starts to go viral. And we had teenage sons at the time. Now, keep in mind, so my life, our family, I am a local elected official. I am a trial lawyer, a serious practicing trial lawyer. I am a little league coach. I am a volunteer at civic organizations, right? Our life sort of depends upon me being perceived as a rational actor, right? A guy you would trust with your kid or your case or, your charity
Or
organization,
your
whatever,
life for some
or your
clients?
life, right? So one of my sons, when this video is just exploding, says to me in the kitchen, Dad, what are the numbers on the video today? And my wife goes, Video? What video? And I went, Well, see, what had happened was, and she's like, Show me. So I opened the laptop and I put it on the counter while we're making dinner. And it gets to the first punchline, which is because, of course, there's no such thing as a woman who's not at least a four crazy. And my wife, she looks at me and she says, You have to take this down. And I said, Take it down. You don't seem to understand. There's no taking this down. I'm on like bro Bible crack. I'm on the New York Times. There's no taking this back.
As they
There's no
used to
taking
say,
this down.
yeah, as they used to say, the horse is out of the barn.
That's right. It's long gone. And so she watches the rest of this video. And of course, the punchlines get, let's say, more and more provocative or dangerous, right? And it gets to the end and she goes, I looked at her and she could see the pitchforks and torches coming, right? She could see that the only way that, like, the next inevitable thing was that we were going to have to move, change our name, and start all over, right? She looks at me and she goes, You are an idiot. And I go, Okay. And then she goes, But I'm a unicorn. And I go, Yes, that was the entire point of this video. You are the original unicorn. And so she's been a good sport about it. And it's 14 years on and we didn't have to move and no one came and burned our house down.
That's totally amazing. And when James put it on his YouTube channel, how did that impact his channel in particular? Did it give him a big
Oh,
boost
good
of
Lord.
visibility?
Yeah. I mean, he probably had, I don't know, tens of millions of views, maybe six-digit millions of views before his channel got cut down by YouTube for other reasons. So I'm sure this was back when YouTube paid revenue differently. So I'm sure he collected, I don't know how much, I never asked, don't care. But yeah, I mean, and to this day, if you see the entire video, of course, it starts with the tactical response logo and James Yeager and all that. And one of the most viral videos in the history of YouTube and the internet will live on. And when I see it today, I just miss James.
Yeah, and tell me a little bit about James. Tell me about your relationship, what kind of guy he was, what he was into. Ben touched on it a little bit yesterday when I was speaking with him before we did this call, and Ben, couldn't say enough good things about him. But let me get your perspective.
James was a patriot and a good man. He was one of the most generous men I ever met. He was highly controversial because James zero filter. Like if you talk to me, when we're drinking whiskey and not recording ourselves, you'd probably say you have zero filter. James has zero filter whenever, wherever. And passionate believer in liberty in our country and individualism and the possibilities that any person could make themselves anything they wanted to be. He changed so many people's lives for the better just by challenging them, like, hey, man, you can be a better whatever. And became a firearms instructor and built a very high profile, profitable firearms instruction school. And, it was not without some controversy because he would say what he thought. And anytime, if you've been seen on the internet by a million people, there are going to be people that hate you. There are going to be people that, that take issue with what you say or whatever. But there was an occasion where I was in court with James one time and we had a hearing for a day. And the situation doesn't matter at all, except to say that the judge, I thought, astutely observed this. There's James Yeager, the YouTube guy, and then there's James Yeager, the man. And I think the judge probably thought that there was a greater distinction between James Yeager, the YouTube guy, and James Yeager, the man, than there actually was, because he was pretty much the same guy. But if you spent time with James, you'd see him be extraordinarily generous to strangers. You'd see him be an amazing husband and father and grandfather. I mean, the world is worse off without James. And it was
Yeah.
my privilege and honor to be his friend and his lawyer. And we didn't know it at the time, but I'm sure James is laughing about the video.
Yeah. And you mentioned that, after the video got posted, started going viral, you were out in Hollywood having meetings about potential movie treatments and things like that with the video. What ultimately came of the video? Did you do anything with it? Did you pursue any of those leads?
So the timing of the video just happened to be about the time that Me Too launched or got sort of legs. And so there were a couple things. One was that translating a 7-minute bit into a movie was a project. And then about the time the video was really just exploding, Me Too, the movement, kind of also emerged. And studio executives went from let's make funny movies to let's don't get indicted for things we've already done. And interest in a movie that inevitably would have been kind of like exploring the complications of relationships between men and women and maybe some punchlines at women's expense, they all kind of bailed out on that. So I did option it a couple of times to studios. And, we'll see. There's an ebb and a flow in the entertainment and culture and things that are, you're not allowed to say now or you get canceled, and, will be possible again in the future. And we'll see where it goes. I don't know. Personally, I've retired that, people have contacted me and want me to reprise the character. They think it's a character. It's not a character. It's just me making a funny, doing a bit. I've been approached by people that want me to commercialize it or reprise the character, if you will. And that was then. I'm doing other stuff now. So it was fun.
Do you think if you posted it today, would it get the same response, or was it a time type and personality type of thing?
Man, I think it was a perfect storm of culture at the time, that the YouTube and the internet creating this opportunity for content creators to, like almost accidentally get something that caught fire and got spread. I think the culture at the time was, let's say, different. And I don't want to debate the culture wars except to acknowledge their existence. We've had a distinct shift in what you're allowed to say and what you can be canceled for saying since then, and maybe in some part because of the video, in part. Some tiny part of the reaction to the video fed into this what's not funny anymore, what the rules have changed, kind of what you can say and to whom you can say it. So I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know if I answered your question.
no, I think you did. And just the aspect of the fact that someone can be quote unquote canceled for a particular viewpoint or something that's supposed to be construed as funny to some, maybe not funny to others, where that's just been the general consensus of comedy through the beginning, that not every person's going to find the same joke appealing. And if you don't, it's not for you. Don't listen to it. Don't watch it. Don't subscribe. Right.
Yeah, well, I will say this. There were the people that were offended by the bit, because let's be honest. Okay, look, this was a bit from the beginning. Okay, this is not, if you met me in person, if you didn't like the video and you thought the guy that made the video was a terrible person, you might not think that if you then met me and spent time with me. Okay, maybe you would. I don't know. But yeah, this whole concept of canceling people and all that. Comedy, there's a concept in Russian culture, the noble fool, who is the only person who is allowed to say the uncomfortable truth to the emperor, to the czar. And it's a dangerous job. Right. But I agree with you. If you don't like it, move on. I know from the vast number of places that the video went, the number of times it went viral, it still erupts and becomes viral again from time to time. And I can always tell when that happens because when that happens, it hits some pocket of the internet and pops up, and people start tagging me and people reach out and contact me, whatever. I know that the numbers don't lie. It went viral because 95% of people thought it was funny. 5% of people got mad. I'll take that.
Yeah, and to be fair, 5% of 100 million people, that's a good chunk of folks, but, like you said, who cares?
Well, it's not who cares. It's that it can't go viral if everyone thinks it's terrible. The
100%.
definition of viral, it went viral because the vast majority of people saw it and saw something in it that they thought was funny and worth sharing. And look, the whole thing, I'm poking fun at all of us. I'm not piling on in the video. People could take it differently, I guess, but like I'm articulating things that seem to resonate with a huge number of people.
Yeah, 100%, and before I became a lawyer, I was a comedian, and I did improv comedy in Chicago at Improv Olympic, and there's a book that was written by the owner and proprietor of that establishment called Truth in Comedy, and it's just about, most of the things we do in comedy are, we're just pointing out things that are true to everybody, and we're looking at life, and we're finding a comedic way to interpret that, and your video, the reason it works for me is because there's so much truth in what it is, and of course, it's a bit and it's meant to be comedic, but the undertones of both sides of the coin, because there's a side where you discuss the women, but then at the end, you also do the men, which is a
Right.
shorter version of the video. But each one of them, if you're looking at it through a comedic lens, there is some truth to what you're describing. And it's not for everybody, but it does resonate.
So James's wife, when she saw it, she said to me, I wanted to hate it, but I couldn't. There you go.
That's a fair assessment. And really, the only judge of what is comedic is whether or not it makes you laugh, which is an involuntary response to a set of stimuli that's in front of you. A lot of times people will look at something and they want to not laugh like really hard. They're trying to not laugh,
Mhm.
but they just can't help themselves. And that's a true testament to the bit and that it works on so many levels.
Yeah, and it was funny too because James and I we didn't plan to do that. We didn't know we were going to see each other that day. If we had tried to plan a viral video, it wouldn't have ever happened. And I got out to Hollywood to talk to these studio executives, and I go out there and I fly out to Hollywood and I'm meeting with these executives, and one of them looks at me and he goes, "How did you conceive of that character? That's brilliant. You guys just knew exactly how to make the lighting bad, how to make the quality just low enough that it looked real, and the character. What was the origin of it? Where did you get this concept for this person that you're playing?" And I just looked at him. I went, "Stick around. You'll figure it out."
All right. One last question about the video. Are you tired of talking about it, or is it something that you've accepted? It's part of me. It's in my background. It's something I did, something James and I did, and it is what it is.
Yeah, I don't tire of talking about it because it is something. It is. I am the hot crazy matrix guy. I mean, I don't know what I could possibly do next that would ever make me not that guy. So it's by and large overwhelmingly a lot of fun. I genuinely do love the fact that hundreds of millions of people laugh. If I made 500 million people chuckle for 7 minutes, then I feel good about that. So it's all right. Would I do it all over again if I knew what was going to happen? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe. Do I regret it? Nah, I don't regret it. I got to do things that I never otherwise would have done. I grew up watching comedy specials, many of which were filmed at the Improv, and then I stepped on that stage, and I can only imagine it's probably a little bit like someone who's made it in country music getting to perform at the Grand Ole Opry. I mean, I got to do 15 minutes on the stage at the Improv, and I felt a little bit awkward about it because I didn't realize how comedy works. I didn't realize I'd never done that. And so I show up to do 15 minutes at the Improv. And of course, you having been in the clubs, you know this. I didn't. There's a whole series of people who have been given 3 minutes, 5 minutes. And at 5 minutes, you're out. And you got to start out at like open mic and then get 3 minutes. And then maybe you work up to five. And then maybe you get a little more. I get to the Improv in Hollywood. No one knows my name. Everyone's seen the video, but no one knows my name. And they got a whiteboard and it's got all the comics. And the headliner was Dane Cook.
Hmm.
And, it's like so and so, 3 minutes, 3 minutes, 3 minutes, so and so, there's like eight people. And then there's Dana McLendon, 15 minutes, right before I was the last guy on the stage before the headliner. And all these comics are standing around going, who the hell is this guy? And I kind of realized I was like, damn, I kind of like accidentally like dropped into this thing. And it was an interesting experience.
Yeah, and I guess the
So,
positive note of your video going viral for what it was, at least looking at it, it didn't go viral because, your pants fell down at your daughter's wedding. There's plenty of videos
right,
that go viral.
right.
There's another guy out there living somewhere that's his viral moment and that's what he's known for. And they're not
Yeah,
optioning that particular video into a movie.
that's right. Charlie bit my finger, didn't get Paramount money.
That's right. Okay. So one more question about that. Has the success of the video, has that impacted your practice of law? Have more people come to you? Do they seek you out because of that? Or what do they do when they find out that you're that guy?
So where I live, 30 something years on and 500 million views later, most everyone is aware. The answer to the question, has it impacted my career? I don't think I know, because if you Google my law office website and then you Google me, it's there. It's like first hit, right? I suspect that if you Google me and you find that and you go, I would never hire that clown, that you don't call me. I do tell people before they hire me, like, hey, just so you know. And with one exception ever, either people were like, oh my God, I can't believe that's you. Heck yeah, let me call my brother. I can't believe I'm sitting here with you, and they, like they treat me like I'm famous and fun. One guy hired me and then found out after the fact, like that night, and then called me the next day and said, you're fired. Give me my money back. It turned out that guy's girlfriend had given him the money to hire me and she didn't think it was funny. So I was like, okay, fine. So I started telling everybody before they hire me as a lawyer, hey, just so you know. Net, I doubt it's made any difference in the big picture, but maybe sometimes you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah. What's one particular habit that's made you successful?
Consistency.
All right. And what's the best advice that you've ever received from anybody for your practice of law, your life, or for politics, anything that you get that kind of resonates in the back of your mind?
Mm, I this will sound a bit vain. I'm an autodidact. I teach myself a lot of things. I had great mentors. I did learn a lot of things when I was a younger lawyer. I think if I were going to pass along whatever might be useful, I would say be consistent, never stop learning, and speak with the dead. There's a great deal of lessons that you don't have to learn the hard way if you'll just go read. So when I say speak with the dead, I mean, we live in a world now where the entirety of the accumulated knowledge and wisdom of Homo sapiens is available on your magic box, which is what you're listening to this on. Use it. Use it for something other than scrolling viral videos. You can learn the lessons that have repeatedly been confirmed without having to learn them the hard way yourself.
Got it. All right. And just a few more quick questions. Kind of, they're going to be yes or no. They're self apparent. If you want to expound on your answer, feel free to do so. But a simple yes or no will suffice. Courtroom or city hall? Which one you like better?
Cool.
All right. Criminal law or family law?
I'll give me a drug dealer any day. The drug dealers are a lot easier than divorcees.
What's the most overrated legal TV show in your mind?
All of them. The only legal TV or movie, there are only two. I'll take that back. Three. There are three, no TV show, and only three movies that as a trial lawyer I can stand. 12 Angry Men, Liar Liar, My Cousin Vinny.
Those are pretty good. I love My Cousin Vinny. I don't know if I've ever seen
I've been in
Liar. Yeah.
Liar Liar is a Jim Carrey, and he's a
Yes.
lawyer, and he is cursed by his son, who says to him, I wish you could never lie again. And then he has to go through being a trial lawyer who cannot lie. But My Cousin Vinny is the most brilliant lawyer movie ever made, and I've been in front of that judge 300 times. I've been to those courthouses and tried those cases and had experience with those judges, especially as a trial lawyer in the South. It was both funny and sufficiently realistic that I could be entertained. The problem with lawyer shows is none of that would ever happen that way, and I can't just let it be.
Right. You can't suspend your disbelief.
Yeah, for some reason, I'm okay with being suspend my disbelief to be entertained by people flying through space, fighting, giant angry bugs. But I cannot suspend my disbelief about courthouse drama.
Yeah. I always tell a story where I went and saw the American Werewolf Goes to Paris or London, or whichever one it was. And I'm leaving that film and I'm asking my friend that we saw it with. And I said, well, what'd you think? He's like, I don't know. I really didn't think the werewolf could have caught that train at the end like he did because he kind of had hurt his ankle in the scene previously. And then he caught up and he jumped and he grabbed the train. I said, okay, your problem was with the speed of the werewolf, not the guy that turned into a werewolf.
The existence of a werewolf. Got it.
Correct. Yeah, I
That was
understand
a
where
bridge too far for you.
no,
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, I was with you up until the part where you jumped on the train and saved the day or whatever happened. But up until that point, the werewolf thing, yeah, I got you. What about dogs or cats?
Dogs, because dogs have owners, cats have staff. And if your cat and your dog had a cell phone, your dog would text you back and your cat would not.
Yeah, I have a dog that I would have to get a restraining order against his text messages about when I'm coming home.
That's right. Do this. If you don't know the answer to this question, leave your house, stand in the driveway for 5 minutes, walk back in, see if your dog is happy to see you. Every time. Your
Yeah,
cat couldn't care less.
no, right. I've heard this. I don't know if this is an accurate story, but they say something like if a dog owner and a cat owner, both of them independently die in a New York apartment, they live by themselves. The dog, doesn't have any food or water, and he'll, wait weeks, if not even longer, before he even consider eating his owner to survive. Where a cat will, like, I don't know, check his watch 45 minutes later, they're going right for your
Mhm.
eyeballs.
Taking bites while you're still warm.
That's right. Coke or Pepsi?
Coke.
All right. The moon landing, yes or no?
I'm skeptical, but not crazy. I guess I just wonder why we can't pull it off again.
Yeah, that's a good
If they went
question.
to the moon with less computing power than exists on my magic box in my pocket,
I
it
think
seems
that's
like we could do that again. And I've watched two space shuttles blow up. So I'll put it this way. I hope before I die, they do it again.
Yeah, no, me too. I mean, I saw the 1986, I was in kindergarten, I believe I saw the Challenger explode. I'm from Florida. We all went out at lunchtime. They're like, "We're gonna watch the space shuttle take off," and we went outside, and then all the teachers were like, "Okay, everybody go back inside," and I didn't really
Right.
didn't know.
Nothing to see here.
Yeah, I really didn't know what had happened, but, and then I think it was the Columbia that crashed on reentry, coming back to
Hmm.
Houston or wherever it was. I certainly hope they go back, and I certainly hope they document it, and, I hope they play a full 18 the next time they go up there, not just a couple of
Yeah, I hope
holes.
it's true. I mean, you know, you'd think it could be replicated.
Yeah. What about aliens?
Okay. Here's an answer to that that's not exactly maybe aliens only. We live on a planet that we don't fully understand its origin. We don't have all the answers. And there are so many things that we cannot explain that if you tell me that you are absolutely certain there are neither aliens nor Nephilim, I applaud you for the comfort you have in your certainty. It must be nice. I live on a planet where I acknowledge I do not understand. I do not know how I got here. I do not understand what I don't understand vastly outweighs what I do. So aliens, yeah, could be. Nephilim, also possible. Demons, sure, could.
That's right. What's your biggest irrational fear if you have?
My biggest irrational fear, if I have one. I don't know if it's irrational. I'm not a fan of heights. I don't do ladders. I'll put it this way. My fears mostly have to do with the cause of my death. And so I can tell you that there are certain things that are not going to be the cause of my death. I will not be eaten by a shark. I will not plunge to the earth with a faulty parachute and die in a splattered mess. So heights, I don't, you know, like I will gladly pay someone to do that. I don't think I have any like strange irrational phobias or anything.
Yeah, mine's spiders, and that comes from, growing up in the woods and constantly being harassed by spiders, so to this day, it's not an irrational fear, it's a logistical and
It's an
logical fear.
experiential fear.
No,
Yeah.
yeah, they're dangerous creatures, and they shouldn't exist.
Oh,
Pancakes or waffles?
waffles.
If you could fight one horse-sized duck or 100 duck-sized horses, which one would you choose and why?
One horse-sized duck or 100 duck-sized horses?
Right.
I think I'm gonna fight the horse-sized duck because 100 sounds like a lot.
Yeah.
10, that makes it easy, right? 100 just sounds like drones. That sounds like a lot.
If you could fly, time travel, or be invisible, which one would you pick and why?
Oh, time travel.
Alright, why?
Why? Because there are people and places I would wanna go see. I would wanna be on the road. I would wanna see what Paul saw on the road to Damascus. I would wanna ride with Alexander into the Hindu Kush. I'd wanna understand how the Great Pyramid got built and has apparently no inscriptions to any Egyptian god on it, and rocks that we can't understand how they move and mine. Yeah. Invisible sounds like fun for about 10 minutes, and then you realize, well, you may be invisible, but what okay, now what? And flying, I mean, that also sounds cool, but if you said invisible or fly, I could probably debate that. But if you give me time travel as an option, I'm picking time travel.
Yeah, I go with time travel too, with this caveat of, without any time travel related complications.
Oh, I
You know?
don't want to get into an Inception or what's
Right.
there's a movie where they want the nightmare is that they wind up unable to get back to their own real starting timeline. I'm assuming for the purpose of this answer that I can go and come and that I'm either not empowered to change the course of history as I know it, or whatever I do doesn't fundamentally rip apart the fabric of time to which I return.
Good point. Does ketchup belong on a hot dog?
Yeah, if you like ketchup, I'm not here to tell people how to eat hot dog.
All right. What's your favorite book, movie, song, or sequel?
Book, the Bible. It's everything you need to know about living on this planet, whether you believe it tells the story of creation in Christ or not. The accumulated wisdom in the Bible is astonishing. Movie, I have category of movies. It's called Put the Remote Down, Unforgiven, Rocky. I mean, you can pick up from there. My Cousin Vinny, if you're sitting there and you scroll and that's on, stop, put the remote down. That's what you're watching. Song, Tom Sawyer, Rush. Sequel, I'm hard on sequel. If I ever meet George Lucas, I'm going to choke him. He created and then destroyed the first perfect trilogy of film. It has only been done once since in the Lord of the Rings. But George Lucas went on to destroy his own legacy so that he could sell more lunch boxes or figurines.
Yeah. And where can people find more about you? Your website, social media? What do you have?
Well, so lately, for the last year or so, I've been deeply involved in a podcast called Trial and Error. My podcast partner, I've now left the podcast because I'm taking on a different role that requires that I leave the podcast. But the Trial and Error podcast is the story of an innocent man sitting in prison for a crime he did not commit. He was put there by a combination of incompetence, cowardice, and corruption. It's the story of the most infamous kidnap and murder in the history of Tennessee, and how it landed on men that didn't do it, and the whoever did do it has not been brought to justice. So the Trial and Error podcast would be the thing I would tell you. But it's a true crime genre. If you're just interested in me, I'm easy to find. DanaMcLendonLaw.com. And my handle on social media is Trial and Error. Don't go there and try to find me because I don't have social media on my phone. I only have social media accounts to spy on people, and I log in, spy, log out. But you can find me there. Otherwise, Matt, if you want to know more about me, come on over. I'll either be in the garage lifting weights or on the back porch drinking whiskey.
All right. And give me the name of one person you think I should interview next.
Who should you interview next? Man.
If you can't think of it, you can just text me later.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me put some thought into that.
Yeah, please do. And Dana, it's been an absolute pleasure spending time with you this afternoon. And thanks to our friend Ben Thomas for putting us together. I really appreciate Ben doing that. And it's been a treat. So thanks for coming on Pod Numbra.
Hey, my pleasure.
All right, man.